Hello, I'm Ed Fuquay, Young Adult Librarian Extraordinaire here at Woonsocket Harris Public Library.
And I'm Michaela, a human being here at Woonsocket Harris Public Library.
We're here to continue our conversation about Agatha Christie, this time focusing on her series characters, mostly Hercule Poirot and Miss Marple.
Yes, Hercule Poirot and Miss Marple. She created not one, but two incredibly famous detectives.
Two incredibly iconic detectives. Yes. And actually several more characters, too, that appeared in other series. She was amazingly prolific.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But these are her main two, and they're both fabulous in different ways.
Yeah, they're both very different.
They are both very different. One being, a middle-aged Belgian fellow, and the other being an older, she describes herself as a spinster, but she's like grandma who's solving murder.
Basically, yeah. They have very little in common, but they are both brilliant detectives.
Yes.
Poirot was the first one she created.
Yeah. Let's talk about Poirot first.
Yes. I'm a big Poirot fan, more or less. Mm-hmm. I like a lot of his stuff. He's certainly a fantastic character. He first appeared in Mysterious Affair at Styles.
Yes.
He appeared as he'd been injured in the First World War. Mm-hmm. So in his first story, he actually has a limp.
Yeah.
And he's seen as kind of an older man in his first story. In fact, in his second story, Murder of Roger Ackroyd, he's already retired and has given up the whole detective thing.
Yeah, and then he gets younger.
Strangely, he gets younger.
And more virile as
his limp vanishes. Yeah.
He's got the Benjamin Button disease.
Apparently so. He was apparently modeled after Belgian refugees that Agatha Christie worked with in the First World War.
Yeah, and they do mention in the Murder of Roger Ackroyd, the person that has been murdered is somebody who took in a lot of Belgian refugees, and that's the connection to Poirot. And he talks about how important those people, like the people who were taking care of the Belgian refugees, were, and the reason like that murder is so close, to his heart.
Yeah, she had seen refugees from the First World War who had lost everything, some of them nobility, and they're trying to maintain that sense of pride and dignity despite the vicissitudes of life. And somehow all of that led to this incredibly fussy, obsessive detective.
Definitely has OCD. 100% Hercule Poirot has OCD. He's always dressed phenomenally. Like they say, everything down to his like.
He always is impeccably dressed.
Always, dressed to the nines. He does have that limp and the cane.
He keeps the cane even though he loses the limp.
Yeah, it's just style at that point.
Yeah, Hastings at one point says he thinks a speck of dust in his lapel would hurt him more than a bullet.
Yeah, no, absolutely for Hercule.
Yeah. He's enigmatic. We know almost nothing about him. He never talks about himself.
Yeah, no, it's very much like the facts. And he's interesting in the way of she kind of created that whole stylistic thing of get everybody who is involved, all the characters who are involved in the murder in a room. And all of the Hercule Poirot stories, he's like, yes, now I must handwrite invitations to everyone who is involved.
Who's a suspect, bring them all together.
Dress up, get together, we'll have drinks, and then I will do the big reveal in the last chapter of who done it.
That was apparently a publisher's idea originally.
Oh, really?
The story had a different ending, and the publisher thought it was too slow moving. So let's get together in one room and get it over with. So she did, and it worked brilliantly, and she did it all the time.
Well, it works when you're reading it, too, because you have all the same information that the detective has.
Yeah.
Sometimes even a little bit more. And trying to piece it together, you can come to the same conclusion, but go on a completely different journey as to how it happened. And then that big reveal, it's just like, yes, tell me, was I correct? Was I correct?
She was part of that golden age of detective fiction, and they have strict rules that they follow with that group that she was a member of, the Mystery Writers Group. She does violate some of those rules with a relative frequency. Not that bothered anyone, her or her fans. She became by far the most famous of that group that she wrote with. So Mysterious Affair at Styles was the first Poirot. He's appeared in many movies, played by several different actors who were really great.
A ton of different actors have played Poirot, and even like in the stage adaptations too, because she wrote Poirot plays as well.
Yes. There had been a Poirot, she gave someone the rights to do a Poirot play, and they did it, and she really hated it.
Yeah.
So she thought she could do better, and so she started writing Poirot plays. Poirot appears totally in 33 novels, 3 plays, and over 50 short stories.
Amazing.
Which is hugely prolific, and that's only a fraction of what she wrote in her life.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. No, that's just the Poirot of it all.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty amazing that what she produced. So Hercule Poirot, he has a sidekick named Hastings who narrates many, but not all of his stories. Hastings also retires and goes to a ranch in Australia, I believe, and has to be summoned back to become a sidekick again in future stories.
I thought I was done.
Yeah. Thinking about they dragged me back in. He's a wonderful sidekick in that he's always completely stunned and surprised by everything that Poirot says and does.
Amazed, just absolutely.
He never fails to be amazed.
He's what they would call in modern times, he's Poirot's hype man. He's the one who gets really excited every time Poirot has any sort of breakthrough or points anything out. He's the one who kind of, is Hercule Poirot so amazing, or is Hastings just getting so excited everyone's going, ooh, ah, ee.
He has a secretary named Miss Lemon, who appears in quite a few of the stories.
Yeah.
And some of them are narrated by other people who aren't Hastings. So she does that. What else can we say about Poirot? He's a genius.
He is a genius. Does not handle it well if he is ever wrong, though he is seldom wrong.
Yeah. Very vain, very egotistical.
Very vain, very egotistical. He says some of the sassiest things. Yeah, no, definitely. And he needs everything in perfect order. He will walk into, the scene of a crime and do something that, police or people working on a murder investigation never do, like arranging and readjusting the jars on the windowsill to make sure they're lined up, like moving things in a crime scene just to make sure that everything is in its right place. He's very neat and tidy. His brain kind of works like a computer. He needs exact order to function. And he says some very snarky, sassy things.
Many of the traits that he has, other detectives, generations of them will also come to have in later years. Poirot is one of those people who in real life would have been difficult to get to know.
Oh, absolutely.
He must have been horrible to hang around with.
Well, he's psychoanalyzing everybody all the time. So it's just, if you sat down for, a cup of tea or coffee with him and you wanted to get more about his life story, he'd be like, why do you put sugars in your in your tea? Is it because your mother died when you were very young? Just things like that.
Agatha Christie tired of him. She said she found him insufferable at one point. And she wrote less Poirot and leaned into other characters in later years. I think she liked Miss Marple a lot better.
Miss Marple's so fun. Like, she starts out as very snarky, and I know we'll get more into Miss Marple, but Miss Marple, by the end of it, she's just this fun grandma who's just busybodying and out to solve some murders and some crimes and some mysteries. I'm a big Marple fan.
Poirot was involved in her most famous story, which is Murder on the Orient Express.
Murder on the Orient Express. How many film adaptations have there been of Murder on the Orient Express?
Several very famous ones, including one just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, didn't they have Johnny Depp playing Poirot?
He did not play Poirot. Johnny Depp did not play Poirot.
He was not Poirot. I know who.
Kenneth Branagh played Poirot.
Kenneth Branagh played Poirot.
With extraordinarily extravagant mustaches.
Yes, I remember watching it and then going, the other version is better.
Yeah, the Albert Finney version from the 70s is the one I saw as a kid.
That's the one
I've
seen, and that one's really, really good. Really good.
David Suchet, who was a brilliant Poirot, filmed all the Poirot stories, including his own version of Murder on the Orient Express, with a slightly less all-star cast than the films normally have. Suchet was obsessed with the character and played him and was able to adapt every single Poirot story, except I think a couple of the plays. So it's kind of amazing. In fact, the audiobook I have of Murder on the Orient Express is narrated by David Suchet.
Oh, that's awesome.
So he actually gets his authentic voice onto the audiobook, and the ones that aren't done by him are done by the actor that played Hastings.
Excellent.
So really, the audiobooks are just absolutely brilliant. You get to hear her language and the actors who made the characters famous on television.
Preparing for this, I listened to a lot of the different audiobooks, and oh my goodness, they work so well. It's like listening to an old radio play. It's it's wonderful to plug in on the ride to work. Highly recommend when doing, if you're doing homework or going to work. Definitely plug in and listen to some Agatha Christie. Most of them are available online for free, just because they're slightly older stories.
We should say, however, that Murder on the Orient Express is a mystery that annoys a lot of people.
Oh my God, yeah, it does.
Including me to a certain extent.
Well, at the end, you spend all this time, and of course, no spoilers. You spent all this time puzzling and puzzling and puzzling. The Murder of Roger Ackroyd did a similar.
Murder of Roger Ackroyd also is one of those that broke all the rules, and people just like scratch their heads at the end, going, "What?
Why?" I'm going to coin a phrase right now. With a couple of these stories, at the end, you just go, "Really, Agatha?"
Yeah, really, Agatha? Yeah. One critic said about Orient Express. It's as impossible to solve the murder as it is to possibly have committed it in the first place.
Oh, the amount of planning. Absolutely outlandish.
Yeah, her murders are set up like clockwork mechanisms. And so Poirot, having that computer brain, is able to siphon through them like really well. During World War II, during the Blitz, she was in London, and she was seriously worried that she might die.
Yeah.
And so she wrote a final Poirot story and a final Miss Marple story, which were put in a vault in the early 1940s and stayed there until the 1970s.
Yeah, didn't you say when we were talking about this that she was planning on releasing them after her death, and then said, "No, I want the glory now. I'm going to release them."
She realized she'd reached an age where she wasn't going to write anymore.
Yeah.
So in 1975, she released them to the public. And again, no spoilers, but I will say that Curtain is definitely the last Poirot story.
Yeah. I would say, yes.
Yeah, Miss Marple. Yeah.
She, I don't want to give out any spoilers, but I think it's a really nice ending for Miss Marple. It's a very Miss Marple ending for Miss Marple.
I realized doing the research for this that she lived long enough to see the 1974 Murder on the Orient Express released.
Yeah.
And, there's a shot of her shaking hands with Sean Connery and everything. And it's
That's awesome.
I did not know she was still alive when I was a kid. I assumed she's like from some golden age. I associated her with like Conan Doyle and so forth,
Yeah. No, she lived a really long life. She lived through
a long
so
life.
much.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Agatha. Well, that's why she, we talked about her life experiences last time. And
she traveled around the world and picked up things everywhere she went. When she was trying to get her creative juices flowing again after the divorce and her mysterious disappearance that we've already discussed, she went on a tour of Europe, and she impulsively decided to take the Orient Express. Just off the top of her head, she grabbed a ticket and took off. The most fateful train rides in literature.
I like picturing Agatha like going on her train ride on the Orient Express and just going, what if someone was murdered?
Yeah. Well, she liked the ship in a bottle stories.
Yeah.
Everybody's in a country house, and one of the people in the house committed the murder. So with a train that's snowbound, you literally no one can ever leave the train.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
It's
a perfect setting.
It's the bubble.
Yeah.
It's the bubble that exists not just for Poirot, but with Marple, because she does follow that same kind of formula with Marple, although it's a very different tone and very different way that Marple, solves her different murders.
Yeah. All right. So, Miss Marple, the way she solves murders.
Marple. Miss Marple is an older lady, which... It's really nice to read a story where the main character, and even in some of her stories, she's not the main character, she's more of a side character.
Yeah.
But the central character is an older woman. I really can't think of any other book series where it's an older woman at the center, and they highlight a lot of the female characters as well.
Actresses of a certain age always try for the Miss Marple role.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, one of them was Angela Lansbury, who played Miss Marple in a movie. And years later, when she was having a hard time finding work because he'd reached that age in Hollywood, and she helped create the series Murder, She Wrote, which is very much a modern-day Miss Marple.
Well, when we were discussing earlier, I was saying I loved listening to the Miss Marples because I felt like I was watching an episode of Murder, She Wrote.
Exactly right there.
And it's just,
I noticed the big difference between Marple and Poirot was that Poirot was an odd character who was the stranger and the outsider everywhere that he went.
He stuck out like a sore thumb, and Miss Marple would blend.
She blends in. She's such a typical person you found in every little English village, and she's not based on any one person, but a composite of various people that Agatha Christie had known, because every English village had someone like that. And in the wake of World War II, people wanted things that were comfortable and familiar. And what's more commonplace and ordinary than the old spinster who,
loves to gossip.
Who loves to gossip and misses nothing, knows everything, knows everybody's secrets. Christie once said, there's no unkindness in her. She simply didn't trust people.
No, she does not. Oh my goodness. She is such a cheery older woman, but really does not love the human race. Like she's
Christie
like, no,
also,
everyone has darkness. There is so much darkness in mankind, but also I'm going to garden and I'm going to have tea with the girls later today.
Christie also said she expected the worst in people and was rarely disappointed.
Yeah, no,
that pretty much sums it up. Yeah,
that sums it up. And but Miss Marple, she is just as intelligent, I would say, if not more so than Poirot.
Yeah,
that sort of quiet, hang in the background and absorb as much information as you can. It works very much to her advantage, and she misses nothing.
She doesn't draw attention to herself. She's the kind of person you want to sit down and open up to.
Yeah.
Probably revealing things you don't mean to say to her.
Oh yeah, her greatest asset is that she is constantly underestimated.
Yeah.
Constantly, because she is just that older woman, and she will purposefully, make herself seem a little spacier.
Yeah.
So people do. They let their guards down and they speak to her. One of my favorite Miss Marple is actually the last Miss Marple, the Sleeping Murder.
I haven't read that one.
It's really good. Where she there is this young girl who has just moved back with her husband. She's from I believe it's New Zealand, and she has moved back to England and is purchasing a house in this little seaside village. And she's walking through this house that she's just purchased, and she's saying, oh, it just feels like home. And upon, of course, going to visit her cousin, who is Miss Marple's nephew, and Miss Marple's nephew comes up several times, they go to see a play, and one of the lines that one of the actors says triggers this like horrible, bloody flashback to a murder that she saw when she was a child. And Miss Marple, talks to her a little bit, calms her down, is the sweet old woman that, she is known to be. And, tells her, I don't think you're crazy. I think you did see something. You should not dig any more into this because it might reveal something that about your past, about your family that you don't want to know. So naturally, of course, this girl immediately goes and digs. And it's a great story filled with lots of twists and turns. And Miss Marple of course, inserts herself into the situation, saying she needs a couple weeks by the sea to relax. And of course, she can't stop herself from busybodying.
Yeah.
That's how she places herself. But then you've got this insular little seaside village. And of course, most of the information she gathers about this murder, she gathers while she's busybodying over at this woman's house in the yard gardening and just listening, just gardening. Most of the book, Miss Marple, is gardening in this novel.
They do a gag about that in the television series where there's a fight going on between two people who storm away from each other, and as they walk away, suddenly Miss Marple pops up from behind the hedge where she's been listening to every word they said.
Oh, she pops out behind so many hedges. Like, that is a constant. She just, whenever there's a shrubbery nearby, always check for Miss Marple before saying anything incriminating.
Oh yes, definitely. Absolutely.
She's there. She's used she's used like weed killer to deter an assailant before. Like, it's just nuts. That's another thing. Agatha Christie's knowledge of poisons. I know we've spoken about that. She was a nurse. And in both Poirot and Marple, always be wary of any doctor character because she loves using poisons and different types of drugs with different side effects. So much in her novels because, she has that information in her head. So and it's amazing the way she uses it. And it's like, oh, I didn't know that. Is that true? And then you look it up and it absolutely is. That's a side effect?
Completely.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yes, Miss Marple, the quiet busybody. She's drinking tea and solving murders.
A great character, a lot of great mysteries. All right, so I stumbled across so many things doing this research. We could just talk about Agatha Christie forever. Yes. Okay, first of all, I didn't know that Poirot had this recurring femme fatale in his career.
I had not read. I've read a lot of Poirot. I have not read the ones with her, and I know you've.
She's in 3 stories, and she's talked about in 2 more. The Countess Vera Rossakoff. She's an exiled Russian, woman of gentry. On the lam, kind of a jewel thief sort of thing. I was trying to think about her as like the Catwoman to Poirot's Batman.
That's exactly where my head just went as soon as you said
Then
jewelry.
you have to imagine Poirot in a rubber bat suit, and it's just,
No.
Don't go there.
Black suit, maybe the points on the hat. That's it.
Poirot was almost entirely sexless. So to have a woman who interests him, she's not exactly the woman like Irene Adler was, but she cuts an impressive character when she appears. Hastings describes her as a whirlwind. And Poirot says, "What a woman, mon Dieu!" So he's obviously blown away by her. The other thing I discovered was that all of Agatha Christie's stories are set in the same universe. She has crossovers, not major crossovers. Like Poirot never meets Marple. And she said the reason why she wouldn't do that was because Poirot is a professional. He would never tolerate having Miss Marple intruding on one of his cases. They would just hate each other. They did come together, but I'll get to that in a few minutes. But minor characters from one mystery will pop up in another mystery. Miss Lemon, Poirot's secretary, appears in another story, unrelated to Poirot. But her most interesting character by far she created was Ariadne Oliver.
I know about Ariadne Oliver. Yes,
I will let you explain. Yeah, she's in 6 stories. She's a mystery writer who becomes friends with Poirot. And she's a character clearly modeled after Agatha Christie herself.
She had to insert herself.
Yeah, she inserted herself into her book. The best part, not the best part, one of the best parts is that Ariadne Oliver is also a mystery writer, and she writes about an eccentric detective, Sven Herson, a vegetarian Finnish detective, who, and she gives the titles of these books. In fact, one of these Sven Herson mysteries is on the shelf in And Then There Were None.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Someone in the library notices it. And the great thing is, of course, is that Poirot hates her books.
Yeah, of
and
course
thinks they're
he does.
awful, and is constantly critiquing her way of writing mysteries. So you literally have an author arguing with her character in the middle of a story that she wrote.
Well, someone's got to put him in his place.
Yeah. Ariadne also appeared with Oliver Pym in another unrelated to Poirot series, and she solved a murder mystery on her own in the book called Pale Horse. It's an Ariadne solo story.
That's awesome.
But it's not the weirdest thing I uncovered.
Keep going deeper.
I found it on the internet, and there is a link under the name Sven Herson, and I clicked on it, and it took me to a web page for a Swedish television series.
They're making it
Yes.
into
A company in Sweden has the rights from the Christie estate to do a Sven Herson series.
Oh my gosh.
About the eccentric Finnish detective, whom we know nothing about except that Poirot doesn't like his mysteries.
Poirot does not like him, and he's a vegetarian.
That's
is a vegetarian.
all we know. They're being filmed in a Nordic noir style, the producer says.
A Nordic noir.
Nordic noir
Give
is
me
how they
8
describe
seasons
it.
and a
I
movie.
can't wait for that. I think it's still in production. It's probably slowed down because of COVID. But just the idea, the meta-ness of it all, the meta-fiction that's at work here. A series based on a fictional character in a fictional story written by a fictional author, and a story written by a real author.
It's almost Doctor Who level.
It is bizarre in so many ways. Now, the wildest thing I found, remember I said that Poirot and Marple never actually met in a Christie story, but they have met. Not officially, about as unofficial as you can get. I'm not even certain they got the rights from the Christie estate.
Oh, God. Okay, what is it?
It's an anime from Japan.
It's an anime?
It is an anime. There is an anime Poirot and Marple out there. In fact, it's called Great Detectives Poirot and Marple. They're all available on YouTube because who heard of copyright? Yeah.
I mean, they haven't, clearly.
Clearly, they have not. They're 20 minutes long, and they're based on actual Christie stories. Some of them are massively condensed to fit into a 20-minute cartoon. And they also introduced their own character, Maybelle West, who's like a 12-year-old girl, and her pet duck. She has a pet duck. Yeah. She's described as Miss Marple's great niece. And so, which is why she meets Poirot helping him solve a jewel theft. And then, of course, she's related to Miss Marple. And at some point, apparently, Marple and Poirot are living in the same town as they keep encountering each other. But it's an interesting story because Maybelle West is the viewpoint character as the little girl. but they don't make her the hero in the sense she doesn't solve the crimes.
She's just she's the Hastings.
Yeah. In Theft at the Metropolitan, she comes up with a theory about the crime that it turns out to be completely wrong, actually. Poirot, of course, sees, right through it.
I mean, she's 12.
She's 12, exactly.
The fact that she's coming up with ideas about it at all is amazing.
But the role she plays is, because it's only 20 minutes long, they don't have time to introduce 10 characters. Yeah. So she says all the important bits of dialogue that a dozen other characters would say in the actual story.
Okay.
So she propels the story forward by being every supporting character in the mystery. So the only people who really talk are the little girl and Poirot or Marple.
And possibly the duck.
And the duck. The duck quacks. Yeah.
That's amazing. I love Japan.
Japan is amazing. I'm not certain they had the rights to it. I'd heard legends about this. I assumed I would never be able to find a copy. And then lo and behold, it wound up on YouTube.
That's amazing.
It's amazing what you can find. That brings us to the book that I brought out for display.
Yes. Oh, my goodness.
You've been dreading this, haven't you?
I have been dreading this.
Yes. I told you I'd bring in Agatha Christie's worst book.
It's the worst one.
Yeah. And she acknowledges that. She once said, "Oh, that wretched thing," referring to the book. It's a book that comes from the worst period in her life. It's called The Big Four.
The Big Four.
Yeah, it's bad on a number of levels, including the fact that it might possibly not have been written by Christie.
Oh, no. If it was written by her, it was in a gin-soaked haze.
Okay, this is she had written a bunch of short stories, and she did Mysterious Affair at Styles that was successful, but it didn't set the world on fire. And she had done Murder, Roger Ackroyd. That was huge, gigantic hit. Her publisher was pestering her for more Poirot stories. She didn't have any more novels. And she was in no place to write a novel because this is the same period of her life where she disappeared mysteriously for 11 days.
This is her dark period.
This is her darkest period.
That's not the only thing that was going on with her.
She came back from mysterious disappearance, and not long after that, her mother passed away.
Yep.
So she went to her mother's house, the house that she had grown up, to get rid of all the furniture and the personal papers and things like that, which must have been a gut-wrenching emotional journey. And while this was going on, divorce papers arrived from her first husband.
Yeah.
She was aided in cleaning out the house by her brother-in-law, whom she was still on speaking terms with. But she was in a very, very bad place. And she also kind of needed money, too. She's being offered a lot of money by the publisher for a Poirot novel, and she literally didn't have one. So she thought, what if I string together a bunch of Poirot short stories and make them into a novel? Now, this had been done before, but not by Christie, by other writers. Yeah. And the stories that she chose to tell were an interesting bunch because they involve her personal animosity towards other writers who were popular during this period.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Now, to understand all this, you have to go way back, set your way back machine to the early 20th century. There's a writer named Sax Rohmer. Today, Sax Rohmer, if he's known at all, is only known for the really horrible racist stereotype Fu Manchu.
Yeah.
He created the living embodiment of the Yellow Peril. That was not all he wrote. He wrote a lot of other stuff. Today, he's laughed at if he's thought about at all. But in his day, he was actually considered a legitimate writer.
Okay.
He wrote a lot of stuff, including a book called Golden Scorpion, which starred a French detective from the Sûreté named Gaston Max.
Oh, Gaston Max.
Yes. Now, sometime after that, Mysterious Affair at Styles came out, and he accused Christie of ripping off Gaston Max when creating Hercule Poirot.
Isn't Gaston Max a ripoff of another character
Yes,
as well?
Gaston Max is actually based almost point for point on Dupin, who was created by Edgar Allan Poe a few years earlier. So Rohmer really had no room to talk. He should have been flattered if he thought she was really ripping him off, but she knew she wasn't ripping him off. The fact is, she was a popular writer of murder mysteries, and there's a lot of stuff being written at the time, much of which was not of great quality. For every writer that we know of from this period, there were dozens of them who wrote lurid pulps that today have been completely forgotten about. So she wound up doing a series of stories that were parodies of the writers that she didn't like.
Yeah, it's her burn book.
Yeah, it's her burn book, basically. She basically makes fun of other writers at the time she considered to be vastly inferior to herself, and basically they were. She particularly pokes fun at Sax Rohmer and his Fu Manchu concept. Now, humorously, and I'm not sure whether the word irony should be used or not, the first 3 Fu Manchu stories aren't actually novels either. They're Fu Manchu short stories strung together with a brief amount of bridging material to make into a novel. And that is exactly what Agatha Christie did with her Poirot short stories. A bunch of unrelated short stories she strings together with the bridging material. There is a theory among scholars that her brother-in-law may have actually written the bridging material. That those stories themselves were Christie, but the things that lead from one chapter to another are actually written by someone else.
Yeah.
Because Poirot leaps from the French Riviera to New York City, back to London, and so forth and so on. It's a globe-trotting adventure, the exact sort of adventure that Poirot has never had before or since.
No, he's a quiet. He's not. It's like The Amazing Race. He's all over the place.
He goes up against 4 supervillains, one of whom is a mysterious Chinaman who actually never appears on screen but is talked about a lot. Much the same way Fu Manchu doesn't appear in Golden Scorpion but is talked about. And so Poirot goes up against these arch villains, and they try to murder him in a number of ways, usually basically horribly clumsy ways.
Yeah.
Hastings joins forces with him, of course, and is appalled and baffled by every little thing that happens. One of the villains is, I think, inspired by Fantomas, the French pulp hero, or villain rather. Fantomas was a black-hearted villain. Yeah. One of his shticks was that he always appeared in disguise or wearing a mask, so no one knew what Fantomas looked like. He was the man of mystery. Yeah,
so you're never certain if he's actually there.
Exactly. Several times someone tries to kill Poirot, and Poirot shouts, "That man, Hastings, that is him!" And they start chasing him down. And we actually never know if he's in the book or not. It may just be Poirot accusing random people. Hastings like, "You're right," and immediately jumps into it. Things happen a boulder is rolled down a cliff at them, and cars almost run them down, and that kind of thing. And it's hysterical. She also makes fun of the Bulldog Drummond villain, who was created by a guy named Sapper. Another pulp. It was past the days of Penny Dreadful, but the Bulldog Drummond books are definitely pulp. And Carl Peterson, Bulldog's arch enemy, more or less shows up in this book. And the ironic thing is she did this to make fun of these people. However, today these writers are really almost totally forgotten, apart from the weird appearance of their characters in this Hercule Poirot book.
Immortalized the people she was making fun of, which is just...
The best part about this, and this plot is so bad, when they filmed it for television, they literally completely rewrote it. They used the names of the characters, but a totally different plot, and there's one single scene in which a guy dies at a chess match. That's from one of the short stories. And aside from that, it is completely out there. Oh, Countess Russakoff shows up. She's working for the Big Four, but betrays them because of Poirot. It's a gimmick Saxon we use 10 times. Yeah. Fu Manchu's daughter was always falling for the wrong man. So at one point, after a dynamite explosion, Poirot is believed dead, and Hastings is, of course, devastated. However, who should show up but someone who looks exactly like Poirot, but with no mustaches?
His identical twin.
Yes, he says, "I am Achilles Poirot." And Hastings says, but he never mentioned you. And he says, "Well, all detectives have a more intelligent brother, no?" And Hastings, of course, falls for this immediately. And does it actually, a 5-year-old could guess that it's probably Poirot himself faking his own death. But Hastings does not guess that until literally the very end of the book.
Did Hastings just have too many concussions as a child? I just want to know.
I think he was in the Great War. So,
he was in the Great War.
Yeah.
Too many shells went off near
Hastings. Definitely shell-shocked. The book is hysterically bad. You cannot read this with a straight face, especially if you're a Poirot fan. It violates all of her rules for setting up a Poirot story.
The soul of Poirot is so much different.
Yeah. And even trying to save it by totally rewriting it is still a second-rate story.
No, it's fan fiction, and this is what this feels like.
Fanfic. It absolutely is. So among her other accomplishments, we can give her the first fanfic story. Yeah, basically.
We can.
Yeah.
It's fan fiction. She's pulling people from all different universes.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. She did a Tommy and Tuppence series about a pair of dilettante, wealthy husband and wife detectives. And Tommy's trademark is he tries to solve each mystery in the style of a different detective. So he will do Sherlock Holmes or Hercule Poirot in one story.
Yeah.
And several of the detectives that he makes fun of are ones like Philo Vance.
Yeah.
Who's heard of Philo Vance today? Nobody. But she makes references to the character. And so she winds up a second time making fun of people that today are completely unknown.
They're completely unknown unless you research them because you're reading
Agatha Christie. You have to research them. I'm on the internet. I'm looking it up in my mystery encyclopedias and everything. Yeah.
It's amazing.
She created this amazing universe of mystery.
She did. And with so many colorful characters with distinct personalities too. Like Hercule, like he starts as like, kind of snarky and sullen but then he says things like there's one time they need to talk to him about a murder and he's out smelling the roses and he's saying, but are the roses not just as important? Or we need you to solve, he's like, I must solve this murder because something of most import is up at stake, the happiness of a young woman. Like things like that.
Yes.
Like he is this kind of, sullen person, but he has these beautiful moments, and she captures humanity in these characters.
Yeah, we don't know what makes him tick, and in some ways he's the blank slate. Everybody else are the interesting characters in the story.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating gimmick.
No, she's amazing.
Yeah. Any closing thoughts?
Just thank you, Agatha, and every time I say, really, Agatha, I still mean I love you, Agatha.
A great writer, really left her mark on literature.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we'll be back next time with another book talking about another great writer and detective.
Yes.
All right, until then, I have been Ed.
I have been Michaela.
See you and be safe.
Be happy, be healthy. Bye.
Bye.